So in this video, I'll show you how to export a Metahuman from Unreal into MotionBuilder, and then combine all the separate assets into a single character, apply some textures and shaders, characterize a character so you get proper IK finger behavior, and then export the final animation into Unreal, ready for rendering. So the first thing we need to do is grab all the assets for our Kendra Metahuman character. So to do that, we're going to come into Contents, and we're just going to come down to Metahumans, and then Kendra. So that's the character, that's the Metahuman that I've created to come out, not the common one. And then in here we can come into female, tall, normal weight. So I've used the tall character settings, and then normal weight, and then body. So as you can see in here, this is just the mesh that's actually showing. So because she's got the jumper on, the leggings and the shoes, and we're going to use her head, the only bits of mesh here that are needed are the hands and the ankles. But we do still have a full skeleton in here. So to get this out, we're going to right click, and then we're going to use Asset Actions and then Export. Then we're just going to export that with the same name. And then in these export settings, we're just going to change a few of these. So I'm going to be exporting to MotionBuilder 2020. And then we can leave vertex colors on. Level of detail we're going to turn off. So the problem with the LODs is if you bring in the LODs, if we look here, we've got the body mesh. You can see we've got our high density mesh. We've got our low resolution mesh. And we can see them and we can select them in here. But the weird thing is, if you come down here into the scene browser, there's only the skeleton. So if I select this, I should be able down here, it should show you that it's selected. So if I just select a joint in the scene, you can see it now shows you this is selected, and we can right click and expand to selection. But if I grab one of these meshes, they don't exist down here. And also if you select one of these and then try and do anything to it, like right click, it's going to crash in MotionBuilder. So for the LODs, you're not going to use them in MotionBuilder, and also it seems to create this unstable mesh that's going to cause your scene to crash. So it's best just to leave them out of the export. We can turn off the collision meshes because we don't need those again inside MotionBuilder. And then morph targets, again, these don't have any morph targets, but in the face especially we need to turn those off because again, we can't use them in MotionBuilder, they don't animate, and it's just going to make your file twice the size. So we can turn those off, and then we can hit export. And then for the face and head, we're going to come into Kendra face, and then we can select our skeletal mesh, right click, and same thing again, Asset Actions, and we're going to export, save that with the same name, and then again we can use the same settings that we've just used and export that. And then for the rest of the body, they actually live in common, and in here we can come down to female, tall, normal weight, and then in here we go into bottoms. We've got the yoga pants that she's wearing. So we can right click, Asset Actions, Export, Save and Export. And then shoes, we could take the skeletal mesh, not the physics asset, and then right click, Asset Actions, Export, export those out. And then finally the hoodie. Again, we're looking for the skeletal mesh. We can right click on that, Asset Actions, Export and Save. And then the last thing we're going to do is grab some textures. So for this, we can take a body base color. So we can right click that, and again, Asset Actions and Export to our texture folder. And then we can do our face as well. So in here, we're going to grab this main LOD face color and Asset Actions, Export and save the face. So the shoes, the leggings and the hoodie are all shaders. So we can't actually export these into MotionBuilder. So we'll just have to use a default shader and change the colors on that. So now we've got everything that we need out of Unreal. We can come into MotionBuilder. And then in here, we're going to file, open, and we're going to start with the face mesh. So we can load all elements. We're going to discard all animation and discard all settings and turn off our takes and open that. So that's going to give us our face mesh that we've created. And then we can see in here, so they create this extra node. If we just select that, a null, and if we look at that, so the null here is actually how they do the changing the Z up to Y up, because Unreal's Z up and MotionBuilder's Y up, so they actually just put a -90 rotation in on that to get it to the right alignment in here. But then underneath that we've got the root of the skeleton, which all the skeletons have, and then this just goes straight into the pelvis, and then the spine, and then all the many joints for the face. So because we have this root and pelvis, what we can do is now we can merge these other files in, and it'll actually use this skeleton that's already built and merge them onto it. So to show you what I mean, if we come into File, Merge, and we select the body, And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to set all these to merge all elements rather than append. So what merge does is it looks at the file that you're importing, the file that you've got. And if the elements already exist in the file that you're merging into, it's going to skip them. But if the elements don't exist, then it'll merge them in. And the handy thing in with this is it'll also, if you've got a hierarchy like we have of a character, it's going to merge those in and connect them up into the character and the skeleton. So it'll all become clear when I actually show you what happens. So if we just discard all animation and discard takes, and then if we click merge, so now you can see it's added in the arms and the legs onto this skeleton hierarchy and also brought in the mesh for our hands and ankles. And if we come down here into our outliner, you can see here now in our Kendra mesh, which was in our Kendra face mesh, you can now see we've got a root and a pelvis, but under the pelvis we've got the spine still, but we've now got the right and left legs. And obviously under the spine, if we just open that out, you can see we've got our neck, but we've also got our clavicles for our arms and everything. So the next thing we can do is we can merge in the rest of our character. So we can just come back up into File, Merge, and then we can select the yoga pants, shoes, and then our hoodie. The merge options are still set, so we just need to deselect our takes. We can hit merge, and then same again, and then same again. So now you can see in here we've got our Kendra face mesh root, and then under that we've got our root and then the full skeleton. So each time it's bringing those in, because the skeletons are the same, it's just ignoring them, so it's just bringing in the mesh. But handily for us, it also brings in the skin weights for those mesh and applies it to the skeletons that already exist in the scene. So now we've got our character in here with all the mesh parts fully skinned with the correct face and everything. So just to tidy this up a bit, what we can do is each one of these is just a null that changes the Z up to Y up, so it has this -90, and then below that there's just a mesh and the shader. So for each one of these we can just come in here and we can grab the mesh, and we're just going to parent that under our Kendra root. So we're just selecting that, left click, drag and parent, and then we don't actually need these in the scene anymore. So now we've got everything under this Kendra face mesh. If we wanted to, we could rename this, just get rid of that face mesh. So now we've got our Kendra character, and then underneath that we've got our skeleton root and the rest of hierarchy, and then we've got our face mesh, body mesh, hoodie, running shoes, and yoga pants. So now we've got this, we can just save a version of this. So we'll just call this Kendra version 1, and we'll save that out, just so that we don't have to do any of that merging again if anything breaks now. And then we can come down here into our meshes, so the body will come back to, because we're going to add a texture to that. So we can come into our top, and because there's no textures for this, we're just going to change this color. So we can just come into here and find something that's roughly similar sort of color to what we've got, and then we can do the same with the running shoes. So that was a sort of blue color, and then the same for the yoga pants. We'll just change these to a light gray for now. So now for the body, we can just come down here into video, and we're going to insert a video. So videos are just textures, it's just what they call them in MotionBuilder. Rather than textures, they call them video, don't know why. So we can bring in these two files. So this is our face and body texture, and then all we need to do is in the video we can actually come down here, just grab the face, drag that onto the face and attach it to the diffuse channel, and then we can grab our body base color and we're just going to attach that to the diffuse on the body. So now in our body synthesized, we can see underneath there we've got our base color PNG and our video file. So to be able to see that, what we need to do is change this diffuse so that it's not black, and then we also need to hit 6 just to turn on lighting and shaded textures, or we can come up here into display, model display, and do texture and shaders, and then we can do the same for the face. So if we select our head, we can come back up here into the head, and then we're just going to get this, so the texture for the face actually lives under the head synthesized bake. So this is the main one that it uses, so we can come in here and we're just going to change that to 1 so that you can actually see it. So now we've got our character textured and some shaders on it just to make it look a little bit prettier, and we can save that. So now we've got our character looking something like our character in Unreal. The next thing we need to do is start characterizing, but before we can do that, we need to start hiding some of these joints. So the easiest one to do is the head. So what we can do here is, if we just arrange all these horizontally, and then we come into the neck. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this neck. If I just make 2 views, go back into the schematic view. So if I just come into this neck, I'm going to spacebar right click the neck. So what that does is it selects an object and all its hierarchy. So that's going to select everything underneath there. I need to go up a neck. So we'll do it on neck 1. So you can see that selects the head, the neck, and all the joints for the face and everything underneath it. So now if we then control left click the neck, neck 2, and the head just to deselect those. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come down here to properties and we're going to turn off their visibility. So the reason I'm using visibility and not the show options is later when we characterize this, if I just turn off the show, when you hide and unhide the skeleton in the character controls, it will actually just turn all the joints back on if you're only using show. But if you use visibility, if you turn the visibility off, then when you hide and unhide the skeleton, they'll remain hidden. So basically it won't unhide all the skeletons that you're going to spend time trying to hide. So then we can just come back into here, and then if we wanted, we could go around and we can grab all these other joints and just hide those. So you could go around and try and select them in the viewport. You could use the name, so we could use, so if we like this, we could use star, twist, star. So that's going to select anything with a twist in its name. We could turn off the visibility for that, and then we can shift N and do the same thing again. So we could do star underscore out underscore star. So the star just gives it a wildcard. It says anything that's got this underscore out in it. So now it'll select all those, and then again we can turn off the visibility. So you can go through and sort of select all these joints using the naming, or you can just go through and select them and just hide those to make this a little bit easier to see. So like these, you could just grab a couple of these and turn off their visibility. Or you could script something to do it. So what I'm going to do here is hide non-characterized joints. So if you go back and watch the video that I made about how to characterize a character using Python, we can use the same naming template. We can get all the values in that template, and then we can use Python to just look at the scene, find all the joints in the scene, and then for any that aren't in the characterization list, you can just get it to hide them, which is what I'm going to do here. So that's just going to hide all those joints. So that just goes through and does exactly what we've been doing. It turns off the visibility for all those joints. The next thing that we need to do is on these fingers. So in Unreal, the joints are set up so they stop at the last joint. The problem with that is MotionBuilder really needs a fingertip to do the IK setup. If you don't, then you can only use FK for the fingers. And when you start doing any IK manipulations or anything with them, the joints won't rotate properly. So what we need to do is add in an end joint for each one of those fingers. So to do that, we're just going to come down into Assets. We're going to go to Elements. We're going to grab a skeleton node, and we're just going to drag that into our scene. And then we can Alt, left click, and then just to stop it selecting that mesh every time, we're going to put a skeleton filter on. So now we can Alt, left click, just drag that onto our joint. We can do Align, Translation, Rotation. Then we're going to translate in F5 local. We can just drag that out to the end of the finger. So that's going to give us our, if we just focus on that, that's going to give us our fingertip for the thumb, our thumb tip. And then we can Alt, left click, drag onto the joint. And then we're going to parent that. So now we've got our thumb tip set up. The other thing that we need to do is just rename this. So if we select this thumb tip and do rename, just so that we get the same naming convention that they're using for metahumans, we can Control-C and copy that. And if we just select our joint, let's just come down here, expand to selection because it's easier to grab from down here. And then we can right click on that and rename. And then we paste that in. All we need to do is change that 3 to a 4. So now we can do the same for the other joints. So again, we just drag in a skeleton joint. We can Alt drag that onto our joint, and then we can use Align, Translation, Rotation, and then just translate it in X to the fingertip. And then again, Alt drag that back onto this joint and parent it. Then we can come in here and grab our skeleton. We can use rename, just copy that, and then come down to our skeleton node, rename that, paste it in, and change that to 4. So then you just repeat that process for all the joints until you've got one for the end of every fingertip. So now this means when we actually characterize this in a second, we'll be able to do proper IK fingers. So the last thing we need to do is T-pose and characterize our character. So I'm going to use the same script that I'd used in the other video of how to characterize a character using Python. But this I've just adapted so that it does Metahuman. So the first thing we're going to do is T-pose it. And then in here, I'm just going to translate this so the feet are on the floor. So that puts our character in a T-pose. So this is all in the video. I explain how I do it, and there's also the full script on my website. And then we can run this to characterize it. So now we've got our character characterized. If you don't want to use this method, then there is also, I've got another video that shows you how to manually characterize a character, so you could do it manually as well. So now in here we've got our Kendra character with all the character definition filled out, all the base and auxiliary joints, and then the left and right hand, you can see it's got all the fingers. So now when we create a control rig, if we go into the hands, we can see we've got our fingertips, so we can use IK to position the fingers, and then also when we rotate these we get a proper finger behavior. So now we've got our character characterized, we can save this as Kendra characterized, and then in here we can save this. We don't want to save any animations, and we can turn off takes. So for this project what I actually had was the skeleton file that you can see here. So this is export from the MVN data, and then I actually retargeted that to the Kendra character and then plotted that to the control rig ready for editing. So then I went through this file. So this is the raw file, so this is the raw data that you get from the MVN Studio. So then it was a case of going through here and just changing it, so like fixing these mesh intersections here, and obviously the hands a little bit broken, and then putting in some of the detail that you do sort of miss with the MVN system. So that's usually things like the head and neck. So the MVN system doesn't really track lateral motion, so that's any motion. So that's this kind of motion, side to side or forward and back. So the MVN system, because it only has a tracker on the head and the top of the chest here, if you move your head forwards and backwards or side to side, because your head's not actually rotating, the software won't pick it up. So you have to go back and put that in manually for some of these. So like here, you'd expect a head to be more like here, following the line of a body round. The other thing that it misses a little bit is some of the spine. So because you're taking a very complicated sort of spine setup and reducing it to a few joints, and then also only being able to track that at the top of the spine here and then at the base of the spine, you lose some of the shape in the actual spine itself. So sometimes that's a case of going in, and so you can pin the translation and rotation on the chest and hips, and if we grab the spine, you can go in and just add a little bit more bend to this spine. So sometimes it's that way, and then other times like this. So here the back stays very straight. So what you might want to do is rotate this spine a little bit more, so there's more curve in the spine. So you'd expect the hips to be pointing up and then a back to be forwards. And then once I've finished editing, so once I've gone back in and added in that motion on the head, animated the hands, put more motion back in on the spine, foot floor contacts, removed any mesh intersections and things like that, and just add a little bit more detail to some of these motions. Then we're ready to plot this to our skeleton. So we can just come down here into our character, select our Kendra character, and we're going to plot to skeleton, plotting at 30 frames a second. I'm going to plot that down. So now we're ready to export this to Unreal. So to do that, I actually created in the groups export selection. So what this does is in here, I don't know if you'll be able to see it because it's quite small because of all the joints, but what I've actually got in here is when I click that, it just selects all the skeleton joints. So it's basically everything that's characterized. So from the root, the pelvis and the spine. So if you look in here, we just hide our Lessie character. So the export just selects all the joints that I want. So I'm not actually selecting all the sort of in and out joints and the twist joints and all the face stuff. So I'm assuming they're all going to be handled procedurally in Unreal, so I don't want to add any animation to those. So this, I'm just using the main sort of driver joints, and then hopefully Unreal is going to take care of all the other joints. So now I've plotted my character down, I can select my export, and then we can use File, Save Selection, and then in here we can just save this as Dance Anim Export, and then we want to save everything in the file, all the animation, all the takes, and we can hit Save. So now if we open that file up, we can see in here, because we didn't export that top node, so we just started at root, you can see it's actually switched it back to being Unreal Z up. So it's taken away that -90 that was added. So we've now got it the correct coordinate system to go into Unreal, and then it's only the actual skeleton that we need. So if we expand this, we can see this skeleton here, it's exactly the same as our hierarchy in Unreal. So then in Unreal, we can just come in here and we can import content into our anim folder, and then we can just select our anim dance export. And then in here for the skeleton, you can actually use the Metahuman base skeleton. Although it is, technically it's the medium skeleton, they're both exactly the same. There's just a slight global scale on the two skeletons, so they're both exactly the same. So you can import onto that, and then we can just hit import. So now you can see we've got our animation playing back inside Unreal, and then if we just turn on show retargeting options, because it's on the medium skeleton and we've animated it on the tall one, because there's only a globally scaled difference between them, we can set all this to animation scaled, which is default anyway, and it'll handle all the retargeting for us. All that's left to do then is render out the animation on our Kendra Metahuman in Sequencer. So I'll leave a link to my T-pose and characterization script in the description below, and if you want to see more video tutorials like this on MotionBuilder and motion capture, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.